Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to tell you all about the hot new release. Youngling Beer is finally available in Illinois. Also Project Zomboid, I guess. Let's go ahead and get into the details. Now, as usual, I know a lot of you guys already have Build 42 installed, but just for everyone who needs to know how to get into the beta, I do want to let you know that real fast, so we're going to do a real quick walkthrough. So if you've just bought the game, Build 42 will not be installed by default. You will still default to Build 41. But if you want to go into the unstable build, all you have to do is just right-click on the game after it's installed, go to Properties, go under Betas, and as you can see here, I already have the unstable build installed, but yours will by default, after you install a fresh copy of the game, be on Legacy 4178. I don't know why it's already marked as Legacy, if it's the other version is unstable, but anyway. Yeah, so just go ahead and click on Unstable under the Beta Participation drop-down menu, and it will automatically then install Build 42 with the most recent update, which is now Build 42.4. Yes, confirmed. Now, it is a several gigabyte update, so be aware of that. It is going to take a little while. You're going to have to give it some time to cook. So just be aware of that. You know, I'm not going to go through absolutely... This would be so much easier to clear if my chest didn't hurt from doing 100 push-ups. Now, I'm not going to go... I am going to go through all the most important things and the things that I find the most interesting, and hopefully those will give you guys a good view on where the game is headed and what we're doing here, because we're in 42.4. That means we're 40% of the way to build 43, technically. I hope they know what they're doing with that numbering. Now, the number one thing that everyone's excited about, raccoons have been added, finally. Raccoons were the singular animal that got delayed when Build 42 Unstable was officially launched. The speculation was at the time that they were delayed because they were the only animal that can climb. It appears that due to the fact that, you know, fence climbing is something that they're hanging a lampshade on in this update, that was true. But I'm still glad to see them. You know, now we can get, the fan base can give them some feedback on how the climbing needs to be fixed. And, you know, I wish them the best. We have a couple of new flyers for locations. That's always amazing. There is a lot of stuff as far as controller support, which I'm super happy for, to be clear. I know that a lot of players do still use controllers or they use the Steam Deck. So it's good to see that the, it's good to see the devs really trying to double down on that and make sure that those players are having a positive experience. So while I'm not going to, again, go through every detail that's changed as far as new controls with the D-pad, if you are a player who uses a controller or prefers a controller or uses the Steam Deck, do rest assured, the Indie Stone does have you in mind and is working to give you a good experience here. The chicken coop has had some changes to its menu. I'm not sure what this means, actually, but I'm curious to find out once I live stream this. So the roost and the actual egg laying screen, presumably the one where you collect the eggs, have now been separated into two separate windows. I'm very much for that. I'm curious to see what it looks like. Animal designation zones are something else that's being altered as far as their controller support. The UIs for the animal info screen, the butcher hook screen, and the livestock trailer screen have all been tweaked. I love to see that. They had a lot of issues. The butcher hook especially had a lot of issues with just being able to actually click on the damn thing. And once again, we have more stuff for controller support, which we love to see. They're expanding research progression for metal armor, scrap welded, and proper blacksmithed armor. This seems to be them doubling down on the research progression, which was added in build 42.3.1, which was the most recent one, actually. Yes, we did jump directly from build 42.3.1 to build 42.4.0. In 3.1, they added this ability to reverse engineer armor, weapons, and certain tools. Because beforehand, when Build 42 Unstable first launched, the only way to build a lot of the new craftable items was specifically to go out and find a really hyper-specific schematic, usually in a survivor house. But in this most recent update, they added the ability to reverse engineer those craftable items by doing research on boards, on scrap metal, things like that. Nails, we're going to see that later on in this update. And it seems like this update, they're doubling down on that. I haven't heard a lot about it. Not a lot of people have seemed particularly impressed by this new mechanic. Jury's still out on it, in my opinion. A lot of new sounds, both for resting, the generator, woodlog gate. I know there's also some new sounds for the chickens and a couple of the other animals as well. 2 new biomes depending on if close to a lake or river. I have no idea what this could be. I didn't know that biomes could be randomly generated as far as being close to a lake or river. I do know that the clay deposits that are by lakes and rivers now are somewhat randomly generated. I wonder if these new biomes play into that at all. I'd be very interested to know. Again, I'm going to be live streaming this later tonight, like trying to experience it for the first time, so I'm very curious. Tracking of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, I gotta be honest, I never really did most of that stuff. I never worried about it. I just like killing zombies with baseball bats. I hope they don't double down, it's personal opinion, I hope they don't double down too much on requiring you to like be taking notes on your character's condition, your physical condition, just to be able to play the game. But, you know, more information is always good, so I'm happy for it. More sounds, and a lot of fixes to the fonts, it would seem. A read checkmarks to print media. That's very, very interesting. So I personally actually used a mod pretty much the entire time I played Project Zomboid to have this exact thing. So a small check mark to show whether or not you've read a brochure, a book, a magazine would appear. Now it seems like they're just adding that to the vanilla game, and I am 100% okay with that. I think that's fantastic. We'll see if they borrowed from those mods. I hope they just took the mod and just created a vanilla version for the game. In my experience with most games, not necessarily the Indie Stone specifically, but with most games, when they try to build something from scratch compared to a mod that's existed for many years, it usually ends up being worse, at least at the start. I'm hoping they just used the mod version and just bought it off the modders. We have some new behaviors for animals. Animals won't just eat the grass that's directly under their feet, and they can recognize water tiles. That's very, very interesting now. I know this is something, while I personally have never been super thrilled at the idea of playing a character out in the boonies, I know that a lot of players are, so I am glad to see that they're doubling down on this. And smarter animals that are, you know, harder to track and act more intelligently when you're out tracking them would always be a plus. A lot of the balancing seems to be centered around tools and around weapons. The improvised screwdriver has been added, which is very, very interesting. And we also have firewood as well. Firewood apparently burns longer than other types of wood, compared to logs or large branches, which makes sense. I'm a fan of that. And you can actually bundle them, I assume with rags or with ropes. That's interesting. The wooden spade has finally been nerfed. I've heard quite a few players say that they used the wooden spade almost exclusively because it was an improvised weapon that was, yeah, as they say here, basically as strong as the standard spade. Which the spade was not the strongest melee weapon, but when you can just go into the woods and craft one in 5 minutes by hacking off a tree limb, I mean, you know, when you can make 5 of them at once, who cares if it breaks in 3 hits? A lot of updates surrounding clay, glass, sand, all those sorts of things. I imagine we're going to be getting a lot of these for the forging and for the crafting, which, again, I'm very much for. God knows it needed a lot of balancing and a lot of changes to the UI, so jury's still out on what they'll do with these in the long term. You can now carve wooden goblets. That doesn't sound useful at all, but okay. And you can sew together a leather tool roll. That's, again, I'd rather just throw them in a duffel bag, but hey, whatever works. If you have carving 9, you can now carve a baseball bat. That's very interesting. Okay. I am curious as to see how they nerfed it. Knowing the Indie Stone, inevitably, this carved version that requires carving level 9, which is a huge investment, inevitably has to also have some kind of a nerf added to it compared to normal baseball bats. I'll almost guarantee it. It has to be learned from a schematic, but can also be researched in the same way we talked about reverse engineering earlier, so that's somewhat interesting. There's a lot of changes to the looted and trashed buildings. Now, one interesting thing that they've been doing is that after a certain amount of time, and from what I've been seeing, I haven't seen an update for it, but what I have personally seen playing the game is usually around 2 weeks into the apocalypse, you'll start finding random stores that you may have even visited previously will respawn and be trashed. Random items will be thrown on the floor, there'll be trash, literal trash all over the ground. Now they're making changes, so now you will also find broken and open doors, broken windows. I'm hoping that at some point they'll also add more story elements to these two. I did see earlier, scrolling back up here, I did see as well, they are making some changes. This one is actually to making sure that these meta events don't spawn in single room buildings, but it seems like they are still playing with the spawns for the bandits or survivor zombies, who are basically just zombies who spawn with a duffel bag, possibly some armor, and the duffel bag will have a lot of supplies, usually books, food, things like that. Seems like they're really still trying to play with where those zombies spawn, when they spawn, and I'm always happy to see, you know, more consistent locations for those zombies to spawn. They're a really good resource to find, actually, so Them continuing to play for that, I think, is a really good sign. Just a lot more changes to how the trash buildings will work here. I see we have more about what types of zombies, possibly bandits / survivalists / militia in them. It is rare, but they can have outfits with good loot. That's very interesting. Okay. Again, them continuing to work on this, I think, is great. Especially because once the building is trashed, obviously, it could have less loot in it. But this could be a really good trade-off for that if you have zombies who are carrying loot on them now. We've got a lot more changes to research progression as far as, it seems once again, to the tools. That's what they're really trying to double down on, make sure people have access to all the tools they need. One really common issue I've seen players had, and I've had personally with Build 42 so far, is with so many different items to craft, there are so many hyper-specific tools you have to find. Like multiple different types of chisels, multiple different trowels or shovels or things you have to carve really specific items. So I'm glad to see them investing in creating other ways for you to get those tools that you need. I'm happy with that. And having a magnifying glass in your hand will increase research time. Okay, that's kind of funny. Oh boy, seeing a lot of rebalancing to maces, morning stars, cudgels, rebalancing of weapons that can be produced by welding. Generally, strong reductions in durability. Great. Okay, they're saying the intent of these weapons is to be crappier, crude versions of the proper weapons. Okay, whatever. Alongside, again, more rebalances to the cudgel, rebalances to the mace and morning star. That means nerfs in Indie Stone language. Oh, the baseball player trait allows you to carve the baseball bat. Shouldn't that be the carving trait? That would make the carving trait actually useful. Ooh, there's a mason trait now. Oh, that's phenomenal. Yeah, one of the biggest issues that they were having, I can personally attest, was that getting your masonry skill, oh man, power leveling it from 0 to 1 required you to build something along the lines of, I think it was like 60 small stone bookshelves, which was the only thing that you could make. And oh god. We'll see how this is. I'm curious how many points it's gonna cost. But that's very good. I'm glad beforehand. Basically, unless you played as a construction worker, specifically that occupation, there was 0 chance of you ever doing masonry. Characters with the mason trait know several workstation building recipes that involve bricks or stone and concrete. Okay, carving stone blocks requires a higher level of masonry, just masonry level 1, but carving stone blocks and making stones from large stones, breaking down a single large stone into smaller ones, now provide more XP. So it seems like they're trying to fix the issue of the complete inability of the player to power level masonry at all. I'm glad to see that. I'm glad they're rebalancing the masonry. It really needed it. Seems like overall they're going to be increasing skill levels for a lot of things, but you can gain XP in a larger variety of ways. So let's hope that it balances out. Again, we're going to have to actually play the game to find out, but I'm hoping this will be a good long-term change. Again, the game desperately needed a way for you to be able to actually power level masonry because there was literally 0 way to do it unless you wanted to build 60 bookcases in a field somewhere. You would never actually need those for your base. Added the trait Inventive, which provides a benefit with learning recipes from items or the auto-learn mechanic by reducing the required level. Still needs an icon. Added the trait Artisan, which provides +1 pottery and glass making. Also still needs an icon. Alright, that's kind of cool, I guess. I mean, again, it doesn't really solve the issue of glass making and pottery being kind of useless unless you're playing on a multiplayer server and you're 6 months in and the entire server has been looted. But I mean, most multiplayers at that point just restart. So I'm still not sure why they're continuing to double down on these. Again, I like a lot of the new crafting, but there's still just not a lot of reason to use it. That's what they really need. Filleting fish provides butchering XP rather than cooking now, and further balancing to butchering overall. Animal corpses will start to rot, rebalancing to carving recipe time requirements. Good changes, those are good changes. I'm a big fan of those. Here is something that's not a nerf. The durability of stone, bone, and metal spears was boosted. Okay, well, there we go. That's something that's not a nerf, thank God. And we have quite a few crafting recipes that have been added here, it would seem. You can forge gold and silver scrap, gold and silver bars by melting down jewelry. Kettles and saucepans can be forged out of copper. Gold and silver spoons, butter knives, and forks can be forged. Okay, that's good. A jawbone morning star is quite cool, though. I'm a fan of that. But again, you know my favorite part of this game is smacking zombies in the face. Players should now be able to generate blacksmithing XP consistently by producing gold and silver tableware, goblets, cups, and masks by scrapping gold and silver jewelry. Okay, but who needs that, though? Who needs all this jewelry? Who needs all this scrap and goblets and tableware? It's just gonna sit in your base. You're not gonna have anything to do with it. It's just gonna take up space. Added recipe for rendering metal baseball bat type weapons into aluminum scrap. Literally, why would you ever do that? Aluminum is the most common metal in the Earth's surface. You could literally melt down pop cans to get aluminum. Why would you ever melt down an aluminum baseball bat? Based on community feedback, mildly nerfed short blast class weapons. Why would you ever mildly nerf anything? If you have to nerf anything, why, if you feel the need to do slight nerfs, why even bother? What's the point in slight nerfs? If some people think it's a little overpowered, who cares? Bombs and bomb-type weapons have a max condition of 1, so they never spawn in the worn state, which actually is funny. I have seen that a few times, and it's just genuinely hilarious. New types of schematics, survival schematics that teach wilderness and post-apocalyptic type survival recipes. Wasn't that what the magazines already did? I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of the schematics, not because they're not cool or they don't do anything that's interesting, but the magazines are more thematic and more interesting and just look cooler. I don't know why they're doubling down on schematics. Animals killed with a car yield way less meat, and the meat will be of poor quality. That feels a little unnecessary, but fine. I suppose they don't want to reward players who just find a group of deer and run them over with their car. Fine, whatever. Animals can now be added to graves. Okay, cool. Okay, that's actually a pretty good choice. I'm sure that someone's keeping pets out there. And once again, since animals can now rot, meat will be rotten if the animal has stayed dead for too long before you butcher it. That makes sense. I'm a fan of that. The time until a building is considered maximum trashed and looted, we talked about that change earlier on, has been changed from 56 days to 90 days. Okay, so it's going to take a little bit longer for a building to be fully looted out. That's interesting. But it looks like buildings will become ratty much more quickly. Sledgehammers can spawn as surface clutter in farm storage and garages. I love that. We did need more sledgehammers. It was weird they were just unable to be found anywhere. Can we find them in tool stores now? That never made any sense. Can we do that? Mild reduction to the chance and amount of armor and weapons that spawn on survivalist outfit zombies. Okay, so those are the exact type of zombies we were talking about before that can spawn in the looted areas as well as just out in the world. They now have less armor on them. That sucks. And a nerf to the actual amount of stuff they have out on them. A nerf to the amount of loot they carry. Wow, that's awful. Both bandits and survivalist outfit zombies will have good stuff. They were just nudged to have slightly less good stuff. Okay, again, what's the point in slight nerfs? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Some vehicle types can spawn sledgehammers as part of their trunk loot. I love that. Again, can they spawn in tool stores? And it looks like some changes to the plumbing. Well, we still can't actually use... Okay, whatever. And there are a couple of changes to the generators. I haven't really mentioned those before, but it looks like they're all the changes to the generators appear to be either aesthetic or based on the sound that they make, which is good. I'm glad to see they're still changing things. Okay, so now I've read through it. What's my initial reaction? Some very, very good things, some nasty things. We'll have to play it and find out. Okay, if there's one thing that really I do find interesting about this new update, it's how much they're doubling and tripling down on the looted building mechanic. I do actually find that really interesting, and I'm kind of excited to experience that, how the world will change on its own. So not only will you have like the meta events of gunshots in the distance or screaming survivors that you never actually see, you'll see the world physically changing as if other people have been there when you're not around. I kind of like that. I'm into that. So could be interesting. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video has helped to keep you updated on what's going on in the newest Project Zomboid update. You guys have been amazing. I have been Richard, and I'll see you in the next one.